Hey, Matt Jones with Rocket Hatch. I'm here with Thom Rigsby, who has been doing some great stuff in helping us to respond to the coronavirus and things along those lines. And as we sit here today, we are, I was going to say in the middle of it, but honestly, we don't know where we are in this whole thing. But we are dealing with it. So Thom, thanks for jumping in and being willing to be a part of this conversation and for the community building. So first thing, tell me about kind of what prompted you. You've got a Facebook group going that you're working as an administrator on or moderator on. Tell me a little bit about that, what you're wanting to do and what you're seeing happen with that.
Sure. Well, I work daily with business owners, leaders, helping them build stronger businesses and create the life and lifestyle that they want. And one of the things that we saw was on a pretty consistent basis, I was getting kind of the same questions over and over from both clients and contacts. And an old mentor of mine says, when someone asks you 3 times, you've got a product. So I took that and said, okay, how can I leverage my answers to these questions so that we get it out to the broadest distribution possible? And you know, you use the platforms that are available. Facebook has a great distribution network. I already had a 5-day-a-week video podcast I was doing on Facebook, so it just kind of made sense to create a group where we could kind of allow people to congregate, get good information, communicate with each other, and then kind of transition my podcast for the time being into a daily update on what's going on with the virus, particularly as it relates to small business owners, what we should be thinking about, how we can prepare, and then hopefully at some point how we can recover.
Right, which who knows how long that'll be at this point. So how many people do you have in that group right now?
Just looking at the numbers, we have 247 members in the group.
Okay.
And that group is 2 weeks old. It will be 2 weeks old Monday.
Yeah.
So about 250. So I mean, we're adding. I don't know what the math is on that, but we're adding, double digits a day.
Okay. And so if there's somebody watching this that's just piqued their interest, that there's a Facebook group where we're talking through this kind of stuff, how do they find that group?
The easiest way to do it is to just type in thomrigsby.com/corona, and that will take you to the right group.
Okay.
If you're on Facebook and you want to search for, and it's a long name, that's why I said the other one's easier.
Okay.
Small businesses fight COVID-19, then you're likely to find us as well.
Okay, and we'll add that into the video stuff here as well, so that people can see that.
Sure.
With it. So, what have been kind of the main themes? You said someone told you if you heard 3 questions at the same time. So, what were those questions that you were hearing, and how have those questions evolved since that time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the beginning, it was prior to a lot of these mandated shutdowns. And I should point out, we have members in the group from all over the world, actually. I mean, we've got a European contingent that checks in every day, Australian folks that check in later in the day. It was just as this thing was emerging. The questions were, is this something I need to worry about? What if this thing takes off? What do I need to do? Am I going to have to shut down? As we got into more of the meat and potatoes of this outbreak, we got questions like, okay, I've been told I have to shut down. How am I going to pay my employees?
Right.
Should I keep paying them or should I lay them off? Now, as we are seeing some of these emergency financing and the SBA funding being loosened up a little bit, the questions tend to be, how do I get that? Should I get that? What should I spend it on? And we are just now beginning to get hints of, okay, when this thing is over, what's next?
Yeah. So the funding is a big thing. Like I've seen that in the group. And I know there's a lot of webinars. The SBA is running webinars. The local Chamber of Commerce here in Huntsville has been running webinars and those kind of things. But if someone's not familiar with that, in a nutshell, explain to them kind of what the SBA line of funding is, because that is a bit different than some of the other conversations that are going on the $2 trillion thing.
Yeah. So for the SBA Emergency Economic Impact Loans, these are very similar to the types of loans that the SBA does following a hurricane, tornado, ice storm, fill in the disaster blank there. That are direct loans from the SBA, which is different than an SBA guaranteed loan that you might get from the bank. These come directly from the SBA. There are some restrictions on what you can use the money for.
Okay.
These loans are intended to help bridge the gap between now and when we're back to making revenue.
Right.
They're not really interested in funding your growth or helping you buy a building or something like that. But if you need to, with the Family First Act that was passed last week, there's some federally mandated benefits I have to pay now. Well, if I don't have any customers coming in, how am I going to pay those benefits?
Okay.
That's an excellent use of these funds. And then, of course, we've got the CARES Act that I saw just passed a little while ago. That's going to give us some different funding options. So we'll have a kind of a recap and examination of all of those as soon as we know what those are too.
Okay. And it seems like I remember reading in multiple places that the intent is to keep employees on your payroll.
Yes.
So
the goal is, this is temporary, right? And I tell people frequently that this is much more closely aligned with a 9/11 type event than it is with a 2008 housing crisis event.
Right.
And I don't know what this says about my age, but I'll go ahead and admit it. I mean, this is kind of the third big economic impact I've been through, the dot-com meltdown, 9/11, and the 08, 09. And so because of that, it's very temporary, right?
Yeah.
It's not, it's something that we should be able to move through pretty quickly. So if we can enable employers to maintain that relationship with the employer's already set up to provide benefits and resources and work for the employees. We want them to stay connected as long as possible.
Yeah.
And so that's really what it's kind of a three-legged stool is the example I use. But it's the three legs that are protecting the employees, providing gap funding, and now providing some direct incentives to spend. I mean, that's what we need people to do.
Yeah. And so it really is kind of life support for them.
Yes.
It's just to keep your business alive so that when we get to the other side of this, there's something to restart.
Well, there's a real risk that, and this is, love him or hate him, the comment was made this week about we need businesses to get back to work, and by the president. And the issue is that's what keeps the wheels turning.
Yeah.
And we need the wheels to turn. So that life support, that's a great analogy. We need to kind of prop everything up for this temporary period until we can get back to work. So if we can do what we can to prop up the business owner, because look, if the business goes out of business, there's no job for them to return to.
Yeah.
And so we have to do something. That's why, locally here, the mayors and the elected officials have been really good about encouraging people to order out, do takeout. Our restaurants operate on razor-thin margins anyway,
Right.
So anything that we can do to keep them above water is beneficial. And in doing so, we're not just helping the business or the business owner, we're enabling that business owner to preserve jobs. Those jobs preserve the benefits that go along with them, and the cycle continues.
Yeah, because those workers oftentimes have families, and so the trickle down is just huge from one
Right.
employer being able to retain their employees. Now, one of the things that you've done on your morning update, which I did catch this morning, that you've gone from doing it 5 days a week to 7 days a week, so you've got some people pinch hitting for you just to give you a break, right? Trying to
Right.
to change everything during a crisis is not a sustainable approach.
Right.
You do have to think differently. But one of the things that you have introduced in there in your graph when you give the numbers is this inflection point. So
Right.
talk to us about the inflection point and,
Sure.
and what that's an indicator for.
So we're all very familiar with seeing the exponential growth curve, right? In funding and business, we call it the hockey stick model. Everybody loves to see the hockey stick turn up when we're talking about money, not so much when we're talking about corona infections.
Right.
The problem is, if that's the only number that we're looking at, that's only half of the curve. For mathematicians and statisticians and number file geeks, they're super excited about this because they get to play with numbers. There's a curve called a logistic curve, which is the proper curve to use to map any kind of infection or spread similar to this. Any kind of virality you can map on a logistics curve. So whether it's a viral video or an actual virus, it works the same way. So it only goes up for a period of time. If you think about the United States, there's only 326 million people here. So the maximum number is 326 million.
Yeah.
At some point, it has to begin to taper off. And if we map that on a bell curve, kind of the, more traditional, maybe what we can relate to a little better, it's the peak of the curve. So when does the infection number start going down? Well, using a logistic curve, we can do some math and figure out, kind of predict when we have hit the top of the curve.
Okay.
And so every day I'm looking at the rate of growth number. Now, the rate of growth number is just day over day, how fast is it growing? When we pay attention to how many people are infected, that's just a function of the population. That doesn't really tell us anything about the strength of the virus, how quickly it's spreading, or how well we're doing in getting ahead and fighting it.
Yeah.
So by looking for this inflection point, reporting on that every day, for my clients and our contacts, we're using that to say, okay, we've hit the inflection point, let's get ready to hit the gas again, because there are some things that we're going to need to do and be ready for when it's time to kind of reboot the economy and get back to work.
Okay, so without giving away all your coaching secrets that you got in your back pocket for when that time comes, what are some of those things that people need to be thinking about? And this would be, I want to draw a distinction between two different groups. There are people that run and manage small groups and small businesses that need to look at this, but then there's also entrepreneurs. So let's say the entrepreneurs for the end, but for people who they're running a business, maybe they're in a management decision-making level, what are some of the things they need to have in the back of their mind as they're watching for that particular point when we begin to drop over the other side of the hump? Sure.
Well, you have to think about, what human behavior is going to look like. At the very least, on April the 6th, that's an important date, because here in Alabama and in many states and counties around the country, we've decided to kind of shut down operations through April the 5th. That's a Sunday. Right. April the 6th is a Monday. Well, are we going to get back to work on April the 6th or not? Right? We have a little more than a week to figure that out. And if we do, and all of a sudden people have this stimulus income that they can spend, or the gates are flung open and everybody can get out and go shop and go to the movies and go to restaurants. Think about a restaurant who has been basically shut down or operating at half speed for 2 weeks. And from Sunday to Monday, they go to 110%.
Right.
Right. I've laid off part of my staff. I've cut back on my ordering for supplies. I haven't been maintaining the dining room like I normally would. So, right. Kind of thinking about what that reaction is going to look like. How do I hire all my employees back in a couple of hours?
Right.
Right. How do I get my food delivered while every other restaurant's trying to get their food delivered? Right. Yeah. Just some of the logistical things are the things that we can begin working on now to kind of have those things in place. Okay. And then there's some longer term things that we can think about too, because it's going to happen again, whether it's a 9/11 type event, a pandemic, an ice storm, a tornado. Right. These things happen, and as business owners, we have to be prepared for that. And I think one of the big benefits that comes from this is that it's opened some business owners' eyes to the idea that, there are things that no matter how well I do my job, they're just out of my control.
Right.
And I need to be prepared for those.
Right. Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch the number of businesses who have shifted, pivoted. I don't know if it's been a full pivot, but they have added auxiliary lines, service lines, and delivery methods and those kind of things. And I've been wondering how many of those will continue. In this, and how many of them will be Band-Aids. But I think that's one of those things to where if they begin to take that longer term, they wouldn't just automatically assume that everything goes back to how it was, but that they would think there's some things.
There's a really simple one that I think we're going to see a huge shift occur over the next few months. Before this event, before this outbreak, I would have said that a shift to a results-oriented workplace would be a generational change. We have to have a new generation of managers come in that would be able to say, you know what, here's the work that I need you to perform, and I really don't care whether you're here or over there or at home or whatever.
Yeah.
Just create this outcome. I think we've been forced into that model, and there are some managers of my generation, I'll go ahead and own them, that now have seen, I don't necessarily have to see butts in seats to know that work's getting done.
Right.
So I think that might be one of the longer-lived outcomes of this, that that could have very positive impact on the business. I mean, if I don't have to have a desk for all these people, then I don't have to have as big an office space, and I can save on rent, put that into infrastructure that allows these people to communicate more easily, more effectively.
Yeah, I've had the same thought specifically on space because, here in Huntsville, everything's getting expensive as far as real estate goes. Huntsville's booming, it's growing, and so if your rent hasn't gone up, it's about to.
It's going to, right?
We're in one of those things. And so locally, I've been kind of thinking through that, and this has really pushed that exactly to your point, which was really good, is that this may have been that opportunity for people to try it. What does it look like to have a dispersed workforce and to be able to utilize tech in order for people to communicate versus the idea, because it's not cheap. When you talk about per employee to set up an office and do those kind of things, just the initial cost plus the ongoing cost, that adds up pretty quickly, especially when all your costs are going up.
Well, and it becomes a sunk cost too, and then I just live with it.
Yeah.
And this is one of those circumstances where we're kind of forced into a different model temporarily.
Right.
And if we're here long enough, and I can see, these folks really are pretty effective if under these circumstances, maybe we should try this.
Yeah.
I think that's one. I think there will be many, but that's one, and maybe the first long-lived result that we see, a positive result we see out of this.
Okay.
Anything, I'll just wait. We mistakenly take this time as a vacation and say, look, there's nothing that I can do right now. I'm just going to sit back and wait. Then the businesses that are working toward hitting the ground running are going to be so far ahead of. They will be ones that have built. They will be ones that are able to seek customers.
Right.
And you're going to be back wondering what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's switch now and talk about entrepreneurs, because we're talking about mental game there. Entrepreneurs are a different breed of people. So how are they seeing this particular crisis?
Well, I'm really fond of saying that the job of an entrepreneur is to solve problems for other people at a profit. And so we have the opportunity, or maybe the affliction, depending on how you look at it, that everything shows up as an opportunity, right? So, okay, I can't seat people inside. What can I do?
Right.
Can I seat them outside? Can I, do takeaway? Can I do curbside? And so it's really just an extension of how we look at things on a regular basis anyway.
Yeah.
Now, I do typically draw a distinction between business owner and entrepreneur, because a business owner doesn't necessarily think that way, and they can have a successful, long-lived business, but not really bring an entrepreneurial approach to it.
Right.
And the entrepreneur in a business doesn't necessarily have to be the owner. It can be an employee or someone else involved. So it's really about how we look at a set of circumstances. You and I, during this time, we face the same set of circumstances. Whether I choose to sit back and take it as a 2-week vacation, or step up and take the time to write down some processes in my business to refine some of my marketing copy for when we relaunch, that's the difference between an entrepreneur and somebody who's just reacting to the circumstances.
Yeah, and you just hit an interesting point to where the person who's in the lead seat is not necessarily the right person to be making the creative decisions related to how things could go. And that's hard for a lot of businesses because they're very hierarchical, right? I mean, if you're in the seat, you're making the decision and that kind of thing. So that, if nothing else, that's a huge takeaway for some leaders right now to hear that and say, there's maybe somebody else in my organization that's the right person to be helping think through these, the different options.
Well, there's two things there, Matt. One, a long time ago, one of the first pieces of business advice that I got, that I kind of hold on to this day is, you should strive to hire people that are smarter than you are.
Yeah.
Right? If you think you are the smartest person in the room, then you are starting at a disadvantage. And if you hire people who are creative, who enjoy the work that they do, and you give them just a little bit, it doesn't require a lot, but just a little bit of ownership in how they do the work and the results that they create, they will do amazing things for you.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you tell them, to the tedious detail how to do their job, then they will do exactly what you tell them to, nothing more, and you haven't achieved anything. Right. You just have a lot of people that you have to take care of.
Right. And one of the dynamics that I've seen come into play as well, and some of it's just personality on how people deal with crisis. At the very beginning of this, I watched a lot of people who had lead seat roles who didn't know what to do, but they felt like they needed to do something, and they just got into hyper control freak mode and had people doing stuff that was completely irrelevant to furthering the business or anything else. And I saw a lot of people working under them begin to back up and not do that. So that sense of having enough confidence in yourself as a leader to know there's other people in the room that may have that information versus just barking out orders, I think is, like you're saying, is a really valuable thing. There's somebody here who may have a better idea than me, and I don't need to assume that just because I'm in the lead seat, I've got to be the one to come up with it, and I've got to be in command and control during this.
Well, I think that the key thing to remember is that you can delegate authority but not responsibility. Right? So another way that kind of implements, I can take one of my employees and say, oh, okay, I want you to go figure out a plan to solve this problem. Come back and run it by me, and if it's okay, I'll let you run with it, right? So I've delegated my authority to that employee to go solve a problem. I'm still responsible for the outcome. I can't, as the leader, I can't say, well, Johnny did it.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So if you think about it from that perspective, hiring smart people, hiring people with an entrepreneurial spirit multiplies your ability rather than, kind of takes things out of your control.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. What is, as we kind of wrap up here, what are some other things that you're hearing or seeing that you think that entrepreneurs, business leaders, those kind of things, that they really need to be aware of as we navigate, maybe a quick start from the 5th to the 6th, or even if it is a little bit longer, that maybe we haven't touched on yet?
Yeah, I think really from a business owner, business leader perspective, what we need to be thinking about right now is how can I best use the time and resources that I have? Until we reach the inflection point, until we're at the peak of the curve, we need to be preserving cash, right? So we do what we have to do to preserve cash. Once we've hit that inflection point, we can say, okay, here's my target start date. And then kind of back into a plan. What do I need to do to be ready? Yeah. And I'm telling you, for the restaurants, the food suppliers, they're going to be the weak link in the chain. Yeah. Because that stuff expires, and you can't stockpile a lot of it. Yeah. For other businesses, it's going to be, how do I get my employees back as fast as I can? And if you have a lot of employees, that's going to be a problem. Right. Just logistically a problem. So, if you've been out of your building for 2 weeks, maybe you're working remotely, just go in every once in a while and make sure it hadn't burned down. Well, is it ready for people to come back in? Do you need to get the cleaning crew to come an extra time? Do you need to stock up, supplies? So just kind of think through those processes. When it's time to open the tap again, are you ready? That's the real question.
Good stuff. Good stuff as always. Thom, thank you for taking a little bit of time. And again, even your 7 minutes in the morning is always just great nuggets of stuff that's going on there. And how long have you been doing that?
Oh, goodness. In some form, I've been doing that podcast for over 10 years.
10 years.
It started out as audio only and kind of sporadic, but it's really been about 2 years, a little over 2 years, that I've been doing a live daily video and audio podcast.
So if some of you business leaders who are watching this want to learn more about Thom, there's 10 years worth of archives at thomrigsby.com, and we'll put that up here for you to be able to see that. They can go through and learn a whole lot of stuff from you, but if they want to reach out to you live, is through your website? Is that the best way to do it, or how should people get in touch with you?
There's 2 really good ways to get in touch with me. One is through the website. There's a link at the top, and then in the middle of the page says Start Here. That's the very best way to do it. Okay. If you want to give me a call, the phone number is 844-234-8466.
There you go. So Thom, thanks for taking your time, and if you need to get in touch with him, now you know how to do that. Thank you for taking time to watch this with us. If this has been helpful to you, we ask that you like and follow us, and also that you share this information with other people who may find it beneficial as well. I'm Matt Jones for Rocket Hatch. Thanks for your time.